So in today's tutorial we're going to create this audio visualized logo countdown thing. Okay, first things first, to complete this effect you're going to need Reactor, which is a third-party plugin manager for Fusion. You can come to the Visualised website and you can download Reactor from this link here. If you click on it, it will download a little file to your desktop or to your download folder. Once you have that, you simply open Fusion and drag the file onto the flow chart or flow graph, and it will install Reactor for you. There's lots of instructions on the page, and I'll leave a link in the description so that you can get that up and running. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need is your Fusion comp. So make sure your effects library is open. Come to Effects and Fusion Composition. Drag it onto your timeline. Now, I used a 10-second clip. My default is 8 seconds, so change clip, right click and change clip duration to 10. Once you've done that, we'll go into Fusion. Now, once you have Reactor installed, you'll need to get the plugins. So to do that, you come up to Workspace, Scripts, Reactor, and Open Reactor. This will give you a whole list of plugins that you can play with. Some are free, some are what you old folks will know as donationware, i.e. if you use them, slip the author a few quid. Now, the plugins that we're looking for, if you type search and put audio in, you're looking for audio waveform and suck less audio. Now I've got them both installed, so I'm not going to redo it, but basically all you do is you put checkboxes in and hit install. It will then install the fuses for you, all the plugins for you. You'll then need to restart Resolve so that it knows that they're there. So once you've got all that done, we can get started. And the first part of our example is the actual waveform. So if you press Shift and Space and start to type audio, you get audio waveform. If you drag that into the viewer, it very kindly tells you what to do. So the first thing you need to do is find a WAV file. It has to be a .wav file, and it also within that is quite specific. Again, if you check, I think if you check the README, so click on audio waveform. Yeah, so this bit here, it has to be a 16-bit PCM WAV file, whatever that might be. All I know is some WAV files work and some don't, so you might need to fiddle around to find the ones that work. So for this example, I will use my current intro music. So I've got that hidden somewhere. There we go, intro. Puts it in, and straight away you get a waveform. So now we need to start manipulating this. And you've got lots of settings that you can play with. For this particular piece of music, I found the following settings work. So zoom down to 1. You can filter which part of the waveform is used, but I left it alone. If you come to the third tab, you've got spectrum. If you click on spectrum, and again these were the settings that work for this piece of music. You will need to fiddle and change for your own piece of music because it will vary. It's a case of trial and error to get the sort of image you want. Your wave style can be all sorts of things. It can be sort of bars. You can set how big your bars are. You can do all sorts of messing about with it. Again, for this example, I used a smooth wave and I had the steps set to 3. And that is basically your audio waveform setup. So if you press spacebar now, you can see it reacting to the music. Obviously we're in Fusion, so you can't hear the music, but hey ho. Okay, so next we're going to click audio waveform to make sure it's selected. Come to your hotbar and click transform. We're going to add a transform node in. Now if we view our transform node, let me get somewhere where you can actually see a wave. You can basically use your transform node to move your wave around, resize it if you need to, etc. Now on its own it's not going to do very much, but what we're going to do is add another node after the transform node, and to do that shift spacebar and type coordinate, and you're looking for coordinate space. If you add that in and now put that in your viewer, you can see that it's messing up your waveform. So if you come over to inspector and where it says regular to polar, change it polar to regular. Now you've got your waveform coming out here. If you see about here, you've got this sort of start of a circular effect. Now the coordinate space literally has that setting and nothing else, so you can't really change it, which is where our transform node comes in. So keeping your coordinate space in your viewer, if you now pop your transform into the other viewer, we can start playing with the transform node to try and get the sort of waveform and effect that we wanted. Now again, this is going to vary for different pieces of music, and you'll have to play around with it to get the desired effect. The settings I ended up with are as follows. My center was at 0.77-ish, give or take. It was actually 0.774570. My size I left at 1. The aspect was at 1.244, and that was it. That then gave me a sort of waveform that kind of worked, so we sort of ran with it. What I will caution is if you're using the audio waveform, keep an eye on this proxy for sampling setting. It should be at 25 by default. For some reason it keeps changing, I don't know why. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but so anyway, we now have our wave going on. So what we want is to get that more of a circle, I guess, than the waveform's giving us. If you don't want to, you can leave it just there, but what I added after the coordinate space was the duplicate node. So shift space bar and pop a duplicate node in. Now I think I had 4 copies and I set them at 90 degrees. And what that now gives us is this. So the next thing we need to do is add a bit of colour to it. So for that I brought in a background and I changed the background colour to gradient, radial, and then I basically made a rainbow which I will speed up. You get new points by just clicking on the colour bar itself. Now for this last point I brought it back to red. You'll see why in a minute. So now we've got our gradient roughly done. We need to bring this start point of our gradient into the middle, so we just bring the start x point over so that it's at 0.5. Or you can just type it in, which might be easier. So with our background, I animated the offset to do that. If you come down, come to frame 0 first, sorry. Set a keyframe, go to frame, I think I did 60, so it's kind of a quarter of my timeline. And then I brought this out till we got, oh sorry, you need to put change repeat to repeat as opposed to once. So we're at frame 60, let's just go back to that. So we want it so that your red comes back out. So about 1, I think, should do it. If we now play that through, once you have your colour animation going, if you open your spline editor, stretch it out, check background, and then check this little zoom to fit button. This is the animation for your offset. If you select both keyframes, come to the bottom and choose set relative, what that does is it will just keep your colour changing going indefinitely. Cool. So now we have our background, we can bring the output from our duplicate node and paste it into the mask, and you get your funky coloured visualizer. So next I added just a little bit of soft glow to this. Again, play with the preferences as you want here. The default's not bad. Drop it down a little bit. Play with it so you get the look that you want. Once we have our soft glow in, we have this kind of effect, which is alright, but I wanted a bit more life to it. So to do that, I'm going to make sure my soft glow is selected, come to the hotbar and click transform, and add a transform node in. I'll put that transform into the viewer. Now this is where our second audio plugin comes into play. If you come over to your inspector, to angle, right click, go to modify with, and you want audio WAV. On the surface nothing really seems to happen except your transform node turns red. what has happened is that your modifier button is now active, and the reason your transform node has turned red is because it's expecting some sort of input, a wave file. So the same as with the audio waveform, click browse, find your file and stick it into the file path. Now your transform is no longer red, and if we play this now, if you look closely, there's a slight sort of wobble to it. I wanted that exaggerated, so the settings I used were I went to unassigned median and I took the amplitude scale and cranked it up to 100. Now you can see we've got quite drastic and jumpy movements that respond to the music. Okay, so we've got our waveform going as we want it. The other element that we had was some sort of logo kind of over the front here. So to get the logo in, double click anywhere in your flow so that you've got nothing selected, shift spacebar and type loader. This brings up a loading dialog box and you just need to find your logo, which for me is there. Now you've got your logo in your system. So we can merge our logo on to our transform node, and there it is. You've got your logo. Again, a bit boring. So what we can do is we can do the same process again. So make sure your loader is selected, come to your hotbar, hit transform. Now this will allow us to resize our logo. And what we're going to do is we're going to make that resize happen in time to the music. So again, exactly the same process. Go to the size, right click, modify with audio WAV. Again, you've got nodes turning red because it's looking for a wave file that we haven't put in yet. So browse back to your wave file. And once that's in, we can start playing with the settings. At the minute you can see it's kind of quite erratic and quite drastic, and we don't want it quite so bad as that. So after messing around, I've found the following settings worked for this piece of music. So I set the mode to average, and this time we use the amplitude offset, which I set to 0.906. And this gives a reasonable sort of amount of movement to the logo. Again, there's loads of settings in here that you can mess around with. Play, have fun, see what works for your piece of music and your logos. That is pretty much kind of it as far as the tutorial goes. Again, coming back to our audio waveform, we can jiggle around with this, get it to where you want it to, where it works. This is a proxy for sampling. It obviously changes the shape of your waveform as it's playing. There's no right settings for these. These are just settings that worked for me. Once you've got the basics of this setup, what you can then do is after the last merge node, come up, add a transform node. Now what you can do with this is you can resize the whole thing. If it's in the window, you will see you can resize the whole thing You can move it around, so if you need to put it sort of off to one side, and you've still got your sort of logo. The other thing that I added, if we just reset your thing, the other thing that I added, and again is purely optional, is the countdown timer. So to do that, if you come again to your hotbar, grab a text plus node. If you then go to style text, right click and just add time code, you get this. You can customize it the same as you do any font or any text. You can change the font to something that you like. You can recolor it to whatever you want, some nice pink. And now if you notice your modifier button has again been activated, click on modifiers and you can select what particular elements you want to view. Keep check of this frames per second, because obviously I'm on a 24 frame per second timeline, so that's where it sets. If you are on a different timeline, make sure it changes to suit your timeline so that your countdown is accurate. So once you've got your countdown set up, merge it, and again you can either use the merge or use the text node itself to position your counter where you want it. Put a new soft glow node underneath it, so shift space, soft spelt right helps, soft glow, and then you can again tweak your settings to give the desired sort of look. And that's basically it. You just need to connect your media out and come back to your edit tab. Just give this a second to render, or to cache should I say. And away you go. Final thing you need to do is bring your music that you've been using all along and slap it underneath your Fusion comp, and now so I hope you found that useful or entertaining or both. Feel free to hit the subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment and hit the notification bell. Cheers!